everyone, it's me, your DM, Jay. I use he, him.
And I'm Jerika. I use she, her.
I'm Leap. I use he, him.
And I'm Embers side. I use he, him. And welcome to Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeons of your bad decisions to retrieve the treasures of wisdom.
Wait a second. I just need to do something real quick right now. Jay, you interrupted me when I tried to take this from you, but you let smooth-voiced Embers get away with intro all willy-nilly. He gets his. Leap doesn't get his. What is up? Is it the chicken bones thing? Like, what is going on, man?
Here we go again.
Let's be real here. I mean, let's all just admit this to ourselves. Embers is smoother than the rest of us.
Yes.
And you know, we're just gonna have to stand aside when he takes the lead.
That's fair.
This is Insight Check, where we do delve into the dungeon of bad decisions, and in the spirit of that, we often spend the start of our episodes crawling around in dungeons.
Yes.
And I think that Jerika, my premonition, my psychic vision of the future is that Jerika has a very good dungeon crawl. And you know what? This time I might even try not insulting them.
For our listeners who's like, why is Jay talking about insulting someone when that hasn't happened yet? We did a whole take before this, and my computer crapped the bucket. And
you lost a lot of really good underpants vor.
This is definitely better so far.
Okay, we're on the precipice though. Let's not look back at that dark past.
With no further ado, and definitely no consumption of underpants, let's get straight in to Jerika's dungeon crawl.
You're just leading them on.
I want them to know what they lost.
Oh boy.
Can I give this excellent dungeon crawl its due and give it a little intro? All right, I'm going to need some help from Leap, though.
Okay, I really hope this doesn't crap my computer out. Let's do it.
Can't pull this off at all.
Oh my god, I am ready. Well, I'm going to try and crack my nugget.
With
here we go.
Oh, this is so good. Now, this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, sit on that haunch. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Selgaunt. In Skullport Underwater Deep, born and raised with beholders was where I spent most of my days. Chilling, min-maxing, relaxing, all cool and all shooting magic missiles outside of the school when a couple of drow who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. Had one spell battle, my bard got sconched. She said, you move with your auntie and uncle and Selgaunt. I rolled persuasion at her day after day. She packed my bag of holding and she sent me on my way. Cleric cast blast, the ranger hit the thicket. I brought my familiar, said might as well kick it. First class, yo, this is bad. Gelatinous cube hiding in a champagne glass. Is this what the people Selgaunt living like? Might be alright. But who's this Bartholomew Jacoby Rankster? Is this the type of place to send an eldritch prankster? I don't think so. See, I get what I want. I hope they're prepared for the Prince of Selgaunt. Well, at the dungeon that night and I crawled out, there was an owlbear look dude standing there with the name out. Shoot. I ain't trying to get ingested yet, I just got here. I sprang with haste, Eldritch Blast disappeared. I was just about to cast it when it looked so hardy that big owlbear said bless and cast 8 on the party. If anything could say this bear was taught, but y'all said nah, forget it, to Selgaunt. I pulled up to the house about 7 or 8. I yelled to the owl, "You're home, smell you later." I looked at my kingdom, I found my new haunt to sit in my throne as the Prince of Selgaunt.
Beautiful.
Oh my goodness, we got there.
Nostalgic.
We got there.
Reminiscent.
Oh man, a couple of drow were up to no good. I really apologize to any drow in the audience who may have felt targeted by that song.
Well, we didn't get to hear their side of the story. It's true.
Yeah.
Selgaunt got mentioned a lot. Would you care to explain to the audience, not to me? I know what Selgaunt is. But if you would tell them
I've been
what
to at least
Selgaunt
3
I also
Selgaunts
know
before.
what Selgaunt is.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
my
just tell the
God.
audience, because the rest of us know already.
Oh.
No, if you could really explain.
So, when you are looking, right, when you are looking for the proper analog to Bel Air, right, you're looking for a well-to-do center of wealth and or commerce. I was trying to find something roughly consistent. And if you have ever gotten into some of the D&D fiction novels around the Forgotten Realms world, you might have come upon gone through a lot of books written around the 90s. It is it's a large merchant port. It's right by kind of like if you know the Isle of Presper, it's off of that. It's in the
that old thing.
No, it's in Zambia.
Yeah, of course. That place we all know.
Jay.
Symbia.
All right.
Dude, I think you've done really well. I think we can
Is that
call
Sword Coast? Is that the Sword Coast? Is that on the Sword Coast? Is that near there?
It's
I'm not trolling you. I don't know anything. I don't know anything, Embers. I'm an idiot baby. Please. Don't look down on me.
No. No, so it's not on the Sword Coast. This is to the east, I believe. But it's a whole bunch of Richie Riches. There are a lot of like artists and musicians, and it was a very culture forward town.
I appreciate the level of research that went into this song. But honestly, what should I expect?
Yeah, Embers brings it.
The one where you did the places of Faerun, right? The song.
That took a long
Yeah,
ass
and
time.
from the parody of the Animaniacs, and like all of those places are real, and there were a bunch of like just references to the like not only just like where they listed the names of them, but there were little references to things about oh my god, I could not believe that.
The hardest part was matching like the syllable and like phonemes of the original Animaniacs Countries of the World, so you could like kind of have the right rhyme structure and rhyme sound, because I tried it just by making it consistently rhyming, but not rhyming the same way the Animaniacs song did. And it didn't sound right at all. Like I was shocked as to how much my recognition of that song was based on the specific letters and sounds in that song.
You know what this reminds me of? The Brian David Gilbert Pokemon rap redo he just recently did, where he remade the Pokemon rap using like 400 of the Pokemon that are out now.
Oh,
and in doing so, made me feel like such a fucking failure.
Why? I mean, like you're doing the same kind of shit here, matching up phonemes and making spreadsheets to match up the rhyme structure.
No, in all seriousness, that performance was drop dead inspirational. It was just incredible.
Well, so was yours. You did a really good job too.
My wee quick dungeon crawl will follow Jerika's, so I want to finally leave
Jerika.
the floor.
Now that we've cleared the way, I will roll out the red carpet for another podcast called Stone Houses. Stone Houses is hosted by two lovely people, Caitlin and Byrne, and it is about folklore and other stories and creatures and figures therein. And it features a D&D corner wherein they talk about the thing they just talked about, but from a D&D context. Exciting, charming, lovely, friendly, other adjectives.
If you could take the rapport that we deliver on Inside Check.
Are we now comparing our podcast to theirs, because they're just apples and oranges?
They are.
true.
It's true.
Yeah.
My only point.
It's a food package and an underwear package. Really, they're not
All right.
It's
the
a,
same at
All
all.
right, leave. We're not going back.
I'm sorry.
We're moving forward with our lives now, and we're definitely not talking about the eating packages game.
but damn it, Jerika, I totally agree. I've listened to probably about 8 or 9 episodes of Stone Houses. I really enjoy it. I really like the way the discussion they have around werewolves, the discussion they have around hell. It's a great podcast. It tickles that kind of like deep intellectual researcher compulsion that I have in a great
They've
way.
said words I haven't heard in years. Because I've been out of college at least a decade.
It's just that good. It delivers.
It's real good.
I just really like the idea of sitting down to really deeply think about the sort of monsters that we use almost out of hand in Dungeons and Dragons, and to sort of freshen them up and give them maybe the spotlight that they deserve, because it can be very easy to fall into sort of old, tired routines with these monsters. And if you really stop and think about them, there's some interesting stuff you can do, and shows like this are going to get those wheels turning. So it is a useful tool for a DM to explore the origins of the creatures that they're including in their games. Not to just take them out of the monster manual as they are in the current edition. Maybe look at the older editions, look at the lore around them, research them online, and that'll give you like new ideas for adventures and new perspectives.
Yeah.
And speaking of adventures and monster encounters, I have a dungeon crawl about that very thing. So there was a brief period of my time on this planet, a dark period, where I spent a tremendous amount of time working in Microsoft Excel and doing all kinds of weird, dark convocations within its within its grimy, moldy walls. But it was not all lost, because I've used it to good effect on a couple of independent passion projects. So my newest one is I'm working on building an encounter generator where basically you'll put in your number of players, their level, information about a setting if you so choose, and it'll provide you a few different kind of challenge rating balanced encounter options, where it could be a large number of enemies, one boss, super boss battle, that sort of thing, and give you given as much context as you can about being matched to the circumstances and the environment, all just based in a big old mess of spreadsheets. And I kind of want to battle test it myself, and if I can get it to work for me, I want to share it with the Insight Check folk, and then if that works, my goal would be to just share it with y'all. So if anyone out there is listening and this already exists, could just kind of let me know, because that would I don't need to reinvent something or try to do it my way thinking it's better. So if that kind of tool exists out there and is open and free to use, I would be very interested in seeing that.
Yay.
And that is my dungeon crawl.
I have another song. Ba, 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 ba. I have a small dungeon crawl.
Dungeons where they stand
All right,
their
well, I'm
ground.
singing that. Okay. Ba, 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 ba,
Chaos.
ba, 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 ba. My dungeon crawl is a small and personal one, and it's cool because it actually relates to Jerika's, because I was just playing over the weekend. Small Folk finally opened up its third non-streamed table. We have a kind of a community table that we are beginning to run that is a way to get to know people who are reaching out in case they are interested to play on the stream, or we have a bunch of friends who are
they're reaching in and grabbing a hold of your heart.
They are actually. They grabbed like Indiana Jones style and have just pulled out my beating heart, and I've never been happier about it, I guess.
Yeah.
But we just started.
Really describe the way they removed your heart from your chest. I think that's integral to the metaphor.
I forget what they say in the Indiana Jones 2. I wish I could remember when they do like the Temple of Doom heart thing, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to say that Byrne was one of the players that played in our first Table 3 game over the weekend, and it's the only game that isn't streamed and isn't podcasted and no one else can see it, and it was just a ton of fun. We got some really, really neat people, some good friends of ours, and some people who had just kind of who we've known for a little bit on Twitter, who were interested in playing. And so, yeah, it was rad. It was a really, really rad time. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
And I got nothing. So let's get into Loxadons.
Yeah, I would love to present a Insight Check book report.
Yeah, this is less a segment and more of sort of the thesis that Embers has been working on in the background for untold aeons.
Right. In the living room in my home is just one of those walls full of little push pins and red thread around just a giant map of Faerun.
The great Loxodon conspiracy.
Yes, indeed. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Loxodon. And the reason I'd like to tell you a little about Loxodon is because it's part of the happy combination of two things I love, D&D and Magic the Gathering. And not only are they owned by the same company, which is weird but awesome, but now they finally crossed over. And as part of that crossover, there are a lot of new creatures that you can play in D&D in the Ravnica setting that actually have a ton of history. And, you know, some folks who like both games, like me, have seen a lot of, but perhaps there are those who are curious about learning more. Because I will say, if you go into the Ravnica guide, there's not a ton of lore and background on the new races that the playing setting offers. But that lore and that background is out there, and I'm gonna bring it to you.
Yeah, Ravnica as a setting book has a lot to establish in a relatively short time. So a lot of what you get is sort of a cursory surface level glance at things that gives you the information you need to run, but maybe doesn't necessarily go into like every laborious detail of the events that's gone through the history of each of these races and each of these factions and the history of Ravnica itself. So if you really want to get deep into running it official, and as is the if you're really a purist, you have to go and do some of that extra research yourself.
But is it the case that in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica there is a player character Loxodon race?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
That's so
I mean,
cool.
we'll get right into it. But one of the funniest things about this crossover is so much of Magic the Gathering, so much of its fundamentals of its flavor and its narrative and its game mechanics has to do with a color pie, right? Which is not something that really exists in D&D. I mean, it's not a terribly novel concept, but the depth at which Magic goes to let this color pie guide how its game mechanics work and how all of the cards are designed is utterly remarkable. And if you talk to some of the people who have championed and led Magic as a brand and as a game for many years, folks like Mark Rosewater, they'll tell you that one of the keys to Magic success is colors. So I want to get into that for maybe just a couple minutes because you'll never see it in the Guildmaster's Guide. It won't make itself too known when you're playing, but I think it's actually a really fascinating component to Ravnica and one that adds a lot of depth to it.
All right.
So Magic's color pie, right? It's 5 colors. It's blue, white, black, red, green. It's the colors
of the dragons in D&D.
Oh no! Tiamat pie!
Yeah, red, green, white, black, and blue.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my god, I just freaked out.
And if Wizards never does anything with that, and they don't have to do it now, they could do it like in Avengers Endgame version or whatever, but if they never do anything with that, someone's got to go over there and slap them around.
I elect Embers.
He is the strongest of us.
You heard it here first, folks.
Okay.
Insight Check is advocating you go slap around some game developers.
Don't. Stop. No, we can't. I refuse.
It's fine. We've already said to do it.
No.
We can't take it back now.
We can.
No,
can't
if you're
edit that
going to do
part
it, though,
out.
you have to wait until they shutter all of their assets, because only then will you know that they've never done anything with this.
So would this make
similarity.
Tiamat a colorless deck or an all colors deck?
All colors, man.
Well, look, yes, it would be a rainbow deck. I have built a rainbow Tiamat deck in the past, actually, and it played fun. Not well, but anyway.
Effectiveness is low.
So let's talk about the color interactions. How does this color pie work?
Exactly. So you have ally colors and you have enemy colors, colors that are synergistic and ones that are adversarial. So if you think about white and black, right, that is something that should not come as a shock to anyone. Those are adversarial colors. If you think about blue and red adversarial colors. So yes, it follows color theory somewhat, but it's also deeply ingrained in what those colors represent. So if you think about red is the color of impulsiveness and passion and direct action. Blue is a color of contemplation, methodical approach, manipulation rather than direct action, indirect plotting and scheming. Black is the color of utter individuality and selfishness. Black is a color that will sacrifice anything for the gain and the goal. White may be a color, I'm paraphrasing. Mark Rosewater has done tremendous podcasts and blog posts on this, and he does it better than I will, but I'll just finish. White is the color of allies and armies and teamwork and rule and law. Green is the color of nature and the natural order of things. And that rounds it up. So you have allies and adversaries among these. Green and white is an allied color. Red and green is an allied color. Now, what's interesting is Ravnica was based on each of these pairs. When Ravnica was made as a magic expansion, the card setting, they took every adversary pair, every ally pair, and they made a guild around it. So Selesnya is a green and white guild. Rakdos is a red and black guild. Gruul, I believe, is a red-green guild. And on and on and on. You have Dimir, you have... I could go on, but let's talk about Selesnya, which is a green and white color combination, which is where a lot of the Loxodon live. So if you look at these allied colors, one of the things that you could look at as a lens is, how do they have an internal conflict? How do they have a universal goal and mission? What do they agree on? What do they disagree on? So white and green, they're both these sort of collective identities. So white might be the collective identity of an army of small individuals who have great power and force, whereas green may be focused on kind of nurturing a group and a natural kind of, if you imagine like the sort of the instinctual tribe or collective where nature is in a balance because everything acts to its place in a broader sea of action. So white wants peace. It wants to create a safe haven for everyone. Green wants to grow. It wants to thrive. It's the color of cultivation and wild growth. It wants the natural order to proceed without being influenced by outside forces. It's one of the reasons why it hates blue and black, which are all about manipulating the natural order of things. So both these colors are focused on a bigger picture of community, right? They both dislike interference and kind of lawbreakers or rule breakers. Green is based on strength, just raw strength and power and bigness. White is based on kind of the subtle nuance of strength and numbers. And so I think that's like a really cool backdrop for the Loxodon, because the way that they designed the Loxodon guild is, first, they're humanoid elephants, FYI, if you didn't know already. That's what a loxodon is. They are placid, peaceful communicators. They're excellently skilled in artifice. They're calm in the busy city of Ravnica. If they're provoked, they're incredibly strong. But within their guild, they are collaborative, and they look at nuance and skill and to achieve their goals. They're very loyal. They have very high conviction. So it's this little blend of green and white.
What's the name of the green-white guild?
So green-white is Selesnya.
Selesnya. Gotcha.
That was the one that was on the Ack Inc. game, right? That was the one.
Yeah, the big tree.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're looking at Ravnica and you're looking for forces of nature, right? Selesnya is one, white-green, and Gruul is another, green-red. Now, the influence of red makes that guild much more passionate and quick to action, sometimes quick to violence, but easily instigated, right? Selesnya is very thoughtful, rule-oriented planning. That's the way that they act.
Now, there's other pairs you could make.
Yes, indeed. So they do have guilds. So Izzet is blue-red. Izzet is one of the kind of favorite guilds of the original Ravnica set. They're this odd mix of blue and red being kind of opponent colors. They are a mix of blue's intellectual, methodical approach and red's impulsive, passion-based approach, right? So they're a very odd one, but a very famous one. They're led by a dragon, a giant genius dragon named Niv Mizzet the Firemind, if I'm remembering right.
Good. Strong.
And they're also featured in Acquisitions Incorporated, and they were framed in that game as being great at great inventors and engineers, but the products they make would always work for a time and then explode.
Nice.
Because
That's
fire.
my aesthetic.
Right. Now, green, did you ask green black?
Yeah, like green and anything else, basically.
Oh, sure. So I think green black is the Golgari Swarm.
And
That's the Medusas. You got yourself a Medusa infestation in the Undercity.
Yep.
There's your problem.
You got
That's your problem.
under that floorboard seat, there's a Medusa. See there?
Yep.
Spit.
Looks like I see about 6 statues, so it's been in there for a bit.
Yep, and now green blue are the Simic. They're kind of like the insane biomedical engineers who would make Jurassic Park happen again or something like that. Very, very interesting. That was the first sort of set of decks that I made in the Ravnica setting. Lots of fun.
So tell me about Loxodon. First of all, what's the correct pluralization of Loxodon?
Loxodon.
It's not Loxadons?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no. Just Loxodon.
Loxadoxin?
Loxadoxin.
A pachyderm.
Pachyderm. Yep.
No, a pachyderms.
Pachyderm.
No, it's a Loxodon or it's Lotsadons.
Loxadons.
Oh, that's good.
Loxodons
I
is
do like
so
Lotsadons.
good.
Oh my god, we got there. Magic, you can hire us anytime. Don't worry.
This
We're
quality
here.
content.
Alignment-wise, they tend to be lawfully inclined, which makes sense from the white-green color pie. They stand about 8 feet tall. You're looking at about 300 or 400 pounds, but they're medium size. They get a con boost of 2 and a whiz boost of 1. Same roughly maturation as humans, but they live a long time. They live about 450 years. So as you can imagine, if they're focused on like cultural heritage, the collective natural way, they're lawfully inclined, they value age a lot. So the older the Loxodon, kind of the more seniority or respect they'll command, especially because they can live that long.
Con and Whiz boost. That's great for clerics and druids.
Yeah, that's dope.
Indeed.
Did you say druid?
It's like
Well,
you
I
say
mean,
it in
everybody
Jerika
can use
summoned.
con. Con is good for everybody. And
Mostly
Whiz is the
magic-y.
primary casting stats for clerics and druids. Whiz is also useful for monks, so theoretically, and con is great for monks, so theoretically you could have a decent Loxodon monk as well.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, which is totally a rad concept, I think.
Now, my question, do GIF have any relation to Loxodon?
Oh man, that is like the
Besides being
$50,000
both wonderful at a
question.
party together, where no stampedes will happen.
So in my opinion, that is like a $50,000 question: is how are you going to relate these two races? Because it's going to have to happen eventually. It hasn't been done yet canonically, but you can't not. You just can't not. I just want to see it so bad.
From what I've seen Chris Perkins do, he's played GIF as sort of like 18th century British imperialists.
Yeah, that's very much their.
That
that's
seems
very
their
much
style.
their steez.
Yeah.
They're space colonizers and warriors.
Yeah. And very like right rear admiral such and such.
That may be a bit more of the Perkins flair.
Yeah, probably. What's the sort of flavor of Loxodon?
So it's interesting because with that white green flavor, you can see why they'd want to align it to a cleric or a druid, because they're sort of like this lawful elephant. Their flavor is to be still, peaceful, but super bullheaded. So they are
stubborn.
Yeah, so like they see everything as totally black and white. So they have this, right, like they have this sense that everybody has a responsibility to look out for each other. Once they pick their guild or bond with others, they're sort of devoted, extremely devoted for life.
Hopelessly devoted?
They're willing to, they're open to self-sacrifice for the sake of the group. And there are a couple of famous loxodons from the magic pantheon that touch on that. That's like their one kind of notable thing in the magic canon was a sacrifice.
So one could imagine a cleric loxodon as a martyr.
Oh, totally. Oh, absolutely.
Cool.
Most definitely.
Now we're getting to the heat of the meat.
Yes.
Yeah. So
The meat. No, I like my meat cold.
Heat of the meat. So we kind of know the background, but let's get a little more into like the specifics of, because I know that you've been working on this for a minute, Embers. You didn't come here just to tell us which class they can play.
Which is all of them. Let's be real.
I guess with a con bonus you can really do anything with. Like a con bonus is always.
yeah, well, so there are a couple other little oddities, I think. Like the Ravnica Guildbook definitely emphasizes their skilled artisans. So like they're big into you start off with proficiency in mason's tools.
See, you wouldn't expect that because they're so like large. You kind of expect them to be sort of cumbersome, but the fact that they're sort of deft hands is a nice contrast.
I think that may be where they're going with it, what they're trying to get at. You have advantages on any save versus being frightened, and you have natural elephant armor, right? So if you're not wearing any armor, your base AC is 13 plus your dex.
Wow, that's really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's this really interesting like attribute score move set, kind of, for lack of a better phrasing. Like the way that your attributes play into your character and the way the character buffs on the attributes is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, and with that 13 armor, again, that's going to go back into Druid because Druids can't wear metal armor.
Yeah.
So they're already limited to that medium and light armor, and they can't wear anything that's metal. So natural armor, that buffs it straight to 13, plus whatever you dump into Dex, which as a Druid is probably going to be pretty decent, plus 2, I would guess. You're looking pretty solid. I mean, these are great Druids.
These are good Druids. I'm here to tell you.
But here's a good question.
Hit me.
If a loxodon wild shapes into an elephant, is that weird?
Whoa. Do they try and wild shape into an elephant and then just become a giant human?
Fair. Yeah,
that's
Attack
weird.
on Titan over here.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like the idea of a loxodon turning into an elephant, and it's just like they lean forward.
Four limbs.
Here we go. And then maybe they just swell up a little bit.
Right.
Like,
Or like, you know, when you like hold your breath with all the air in your cheeks, like to try.
not a dramatic change.
I
Yeah,
have
Goralar,
an
you didn't change.
additional
No, I
one.
did, I swear. I did.
Yeah, Jerika, I would love to hear
I
it.
have many questions.
Teacher.
Yeah. So I think there's some disguise abilities that limit one to the number, or to what you can turn into by the number of limbs it has and the arrangement of limbs. I think that's disguise self or some roguey thing. Would it be hard for a humanoid-ish thing to turn into a loxodon in a disguise kind of way, because loxodon actually have 5 limbs?
Oh, the nose. That's true.
I kind of
The
think
nose
of it
on the
like,
loxodon is pure magic
I kind of see it
when you
as
drink it.
as Beetlejuice when they're making their faces all funky and scary, and Alec Baldwin like stretches his nose forward to make himself a giant bird face. Spoilers.
For Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
Don't say it again. We've said it twice. Don't do it. Don't say it again, listener. I'm just saying.
Hey, Leap.
You can't.
Hey, Leap.
What?
Beetlejuice. juice.
No.
Oh boy.
What a dork.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What a dork.
Anyway.
Oh my god. All right.
Good.
Sorry.
Answer
No, I
my
love you.
terribly unimportant questions, why don't you? So y'all would be okay with that, and we're just discounting the trunk as an additional limb.
I like the idea of like Mask of Many Faces Loxodon with then, acting just like a really big person, but then all of a sudden something like the nose is near invisible. It almost works like a mage hand, right? Like you can grab something
cool.
in front of it.
Yeah, you can adjust like you can adjust like 1 foot, right? I like the idea you can just add that foot to your nose. And, like, so you've stretched out your nose to be 1 foot long. It's a very short Loxodon trunk. Maybe you'll pass.
Maybe you're an adolescent because
Yeah, you can be a Loxodon child.
Yeah,
Could
I
be.
feel like maybe they're playing that game that they did with centaurs and minotaurs, where the monstrous race is large, but the playable race is medium.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so you're always going to be a small Loxodon.
You're
Sorry,
gonna be one of
bud.
the littler ones of your clan, yeah.
The little Dons.
Little Dons. Loxa little Dons.
So now I'm a big sucker for lore, right? So there's kind of like a little interesting narrative. So the Loxodon were a relatively recent addition to the Magic game. They came out, I believe, in Ravnica. I don't think that they appeared prior. But I'm sure if I'm wrong, someone will tell me somehow. Then they were ported over to another world. So the way Magic works is they have set designs. So you'll have 3 card kind of releases in a set, and then they'll basically invent a whole new world every year and create a bunch of new sets for that world. And occasionally they'll revisit an old world, but they do a lot of new invention, and they have to decide. Each of these is like a plane, so it's kind of like Planescape in a way, where they're just inventing and populating a new plane every year. So the Loxodon
I have
actually
additional questions.
okay.
Do Loxodon have trample?
No.
Damn.
Oh, that's a very magic-y question.
My next question is, has there...
Embers was dumping that good lore on
what
us.
happens when you invite Jerika to the podcast?
Hit me with
Is-
that cue.
There a planeswalker Loxodon?
Not yet, to my knowledge.
Watsy.
There are some famous Loxodon, but I don't think there are any Planeswalker Loxodon.
Dang, though.
Yeah, there's not that many planeswalkers in general, right? There's like 20 something.
Well, in this new upcoming set, which Wizards of the Coast is pimping harder than they've pimped any set ever before, they're going to
the
be
War of whatever.
War of the Spark.
Yeah.
There will be 36
Autobots.
Planewalkers.
And
36 planewalkers.
Moly.
And some of
Wow.
them will be at like uncommon level of rarity, which is very common for a planeswalker. Usually they're the mythic rare level of rarity. But so
And
that'll be
Jace
exciting.
will once again be the center of everything.
Jace? Oh, the blue one.
Yeah, he's always like the main character. He's apparently the living contract of Ravnica too.
I'm
Is that still a thing?
I'm not a Jace fan for what it's worth. They just not my style.
Yeah.
Fantastic,
You're not much of a
character,
solid blue
but
player.
Yeah. I'm just
What's
not me.
your color of choice? Just curious.
So my favorite color is probably it's green plus. So it's green white or green red or green
nice,
blue.
yeah.
So you're a Selesnian, huh?
That's why I'm talking Loxodons, man.
Well, there we go.
I'm a big fan.
Okay, so the Loxodon lore, you were getting into it.
So, born of Ravnica, right? And then they were transported to another plane called Mirrodin, which is actually a plane of artifacts and machines that are animated by internal spark.
That seems like antithetical to them, right? Because like it's like all mechanical and they're planty.
Yeah,
yeah,
which
but
is
they're
what's so
builders
interesting.
and
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
So when they were there, they had all this metal kind of like grafted to their body. So they became a little bit more clerical and a little bit less, more white, less green. So you'd see more Loxodon cards that were pure white, right? So they started inhabiting this plane called the Razor Fields. And they became like these.
That sounds not like
Is that a good
That
choice?
doesn't sound like fun at all.
Yeah, I don't think I want to be in the razor fields.
Fair point. I don't think that was their. I don't think they were like booking on kayak.com. Like, where should we go? Let's go to the death zone.
Let's see. We've already been to the plains of infinite torture.
Right.
So I guess it's the razor field next.
It's that or the cliffs of insanity.
Yeah. So what is the razor fields and why did they go there?
So they basically like wandered these fields, but when this was happening, the plane of Mirrodin was being corrupted by this evil force called the Phyrexians.
What?
And
The Phyrexians?
The Phyrexians. That sounds like a thing out of Star Trek.
It sounds like a black card, if I've ever heard one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, so the Phyrexians are the oldest villain in Magic. They were part of the very first set. The kind of the origins of Magic was the story of these two brothers who were artificers, and they were extremely gifted. And one kind of went good, and the other went evil. And the one who went evil was corrupted by this sort of unknown alien ageless ancient force called the Phyrexians, or the forces were called Phyrexia. So they robbed him of his soul. They turned his body into this sort of weird H.R. Geiger like machine, and his name was Mishra, I think, if I remember right. And that's where Phyrexia started, and it continues on to this day. They've never been truly banished or eliminated. So they're nasty. So they basically overran this plane, made it evil, but the Loxodon were out in the razor fields, so they became isolated, and they basically have settled as these wandering ascetic clerics, and they have not been, as far as I know, they've not been corrupted by the forces of Phyrexia. So they're like these last holdouts in an entire world that's been corrupted by this evil machinery or of kind of perverse evil intent.
Cool.
Even Ravnica
No pressure.
has been overrun?
No, this would be Mirrodin.
Oh.
So they were
That's
basically
another world, right? Like a whole other realm zone.
Yeah, that's the
right?
Loxodon's summer home.
Yeah, so the Loxodon basically got trapped by this evil Mirrodin sort of lord called Memnarch, which gotta say, not
These names
not the
are
best
something.
name.
So
Yeah.
Memnarch.
Mimnarch.
I feel like he's got a real
the
nasally voice.
Loxodon,
I am Memnarch.
My name's Mimmark. I'm here to say I don't like Loxodons in a major way.
That was just me laughing with me plugging my nose.
Anyway.
But I couldn't help it. It's
But I will close my book report with a few famous Loxodon in case you, the DM or players, want to weave in some of that famous Loxodon lore into your game playing in Ravnica. The first I want to tell you about is Galma the Shaper.
Ooh.
Galma the Shaper is a female Loxodon with a unique gift of artifice. She can flow metal like liquid with just a touch.
Oh,
She
she's a
can
metal
sculpt-
bender. I see.
Oh yeah, it's so metal. But as kind of one who's achieved inner enlightenment, rather than make weapons, she tends to use these powers to craft really articulate, unique toys, trinkets, and little artifact creatures.
Nice.
That's really cool. So these are so lore-wise, just so I can wrap my brain around this,
Yes.
did these people exist as cards within the Magic game, or was this just like lore around the game itself, or both?
So oftentimes it's both. So you basically have multiple levels of a unique legendary character appearing in Magic. So it will either be in the name of the card referencing that character,
Right.
Galma's Elite Guard, right? Or you'll have flavor text, because some of these little cards have quotes that sort of tell the story in little snippets in the card. Well, they'll reference something, dramatic that this legendary character did. Or sometimes you will have a card that's just like, this is that legendary creature, person, humanoid, whatever. And they have, or even a planeswalker, and like they have powers. You can play that card. You can use that card as your avatar. So there are multiple levels at which this narrative and this story enters into the Magic game. And some people, it's totally irrelevant to their enjoyment of the game. Some people like me, it is their enjoyment of the game.
Oh, totally.
It's like, I remember when I was a kid and I got like one of the first sets of Magic that was released in the 90s. Like, I had no idea what the game was. I didn't even know it was a game. I thought it was like a novel being told through cards, and I was completely obsessed.
Yeah, those little sentence snippets down at the bottom were always my favorite part too.
Yeah. Oh man.
I mean, I can imagine a pre-internet world trying to follow the lore of Magic the Gathering, like hunting down new cards and just reading what they have to add, those little bits, and then piecing it all together in your head.
Yes.
Must have been an exciting time.
All right. Legendary Loxodon number 2, Bile or Bayul. Bayul. So this is a Loxodon saint in the Ravnica setting. One of the only Loxodon who's actually traveled the whole world of Ravnica on behalf of the Selesnya conclave. So the figurehead of that conclave. Old, blind, but a very skilled healer and master of druidic magic. He had a giant green gem adorning his forehead that would allow him to communicate with anyone in the conclave. And he was referred to as the living saint of the Loxodon.
Cool.
That's dope.
Oksana Bayul?
Yes, exactly. Now, in the legends and stories of Ravnica, the Guild of Rakdos did try to make a run at Saint Bile, and there were assassination attempts. And in the story, Bile actually survives these attacks, which get through his elite guard by going into basically like a sustained hibernation. I kind of don't want to spoil the rest of Bile's story, but it's very interesting. Yes, and the final is Traslan. That's a Selesnya cleric who would oversee, and an albino Loxodon, which in the Loxodon culture, albinos have kind of like a sort of a mystic status, which you can do with as you wish. But this was a bit of a rebellious one. So Traslan would often go against the orders of the Selesnya Guild, listening instead to kind of like the voice of nature around him. So he was more of a druid more green than white, I guess. And he guarded a very special place to the Loxodon called Ivory Oaks, which is a stand of massive trees that's sort of a holy site for the Loxodons, and is guarded by a special sort of sect of older albino Loxodon warrior priests. So with that, I give you some flavor of the Loxodon universe. Do with it as you will. I only say that the Loxodon are much more than the starting materials in the Ravnica guidebook give you. So if you're interested, explore, because there's more there, and I love that stuff.
I think that you have certainly convinced me that a Loxodon would be a very fun thing to play.
Yeah.
I think I already have ideas for Loxodons. It's just cool to play that like larger, kind of bulkier fellow, but they're still like, they have that nuance of being, green-white, of being, towards nature, of being law-abiding, and still having that pig-headedness about them. Like, there's a lot of cool elements at play, right, baked in, that you can then mold with your ideas to shift into something really unique. I really like a flavorful race like that. Mm-hmm. And when you just see Elephant Men, you don't necessarily think about all that stuff. So it's really helpful to know what the lore is, because it really does. I'm certainly a lot more likely to play a Loxodon now than I was an hour ago.
Yeah, and I like the idea of Loxodon. I like the backdrop of their culture being very rigid, formal, and absolute, but still being based in kind of like the natural order of things, because that gives you both something that's intrinsically chaotic, like nature is chaotic in how it functions. It's not an orderly march towards progress, but it does follow some intrinsic rules, and that's a cool backdrop. It's also something that's cool to potentially rebel against or reject, as loxodons are solitary creatures. There's a whole set of rules, a whole rubric that you can either accept or reject as part of your character's story.
What I dig is on top of all of this, if people want to see a loxodon being played, like I mentioned it a little earlier, but Acquisition Incorporated, they're in Ravnica. And so one of their last games, I think it was West, I'm probably wrong, but Jeremy Crawford, which I'm now going to have to say, we're going to have to come up with a nickname for. So I'm going to have to say the Tusk Tomb of Knowledge is played a loxodon. One of his NPCs was a loxodon, and you met a couple in the when they went to one of the guilds that you talked about, which was just really cool because it was the first time in any D&D game that I ever watched that you got to meet these people, right? And it was rad.
Okay.
So there's your Loxadoos and your Loxadon'ts.
We were going to get there eventually. We were going to work in the do's and don'ts pun eventually. It was inevitable.
It's enough to make you Loxadizzy.
And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up another episode of Insight Check. We do thank you all for tuning in. If you have learned something about Loxadons, drop a comment on iTunes about it. Why don't you? And also add us on Twitter at Insight Check Pod, or join our Discord, which is also linked on our Twitter. You can catch us on Twitch. There's so many ways to consume our content these days. We're just all over the place. And as usual, we want to thank Amy T. Falcone for our faces and Vinswept for our music, which we use for the intro and outro, Never Stand Alone, a beautiful piece that you would really enjoy if you want to check it out on the UpTubs. And as always,
answering your cues from our collective aids, this
was
Insight
Check! This is way more researched than I ever imagined. I'm gonna have to take a deep dive into D&D Wiki lady later.
Lady, you're gonna a deep dive into D&D Wiki, lady.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you're okay. 3 apologies to Pruvie's Canadian.